We noticed the Broncos with these interesting types of helmets during training camp. NFL's embracing the new Guardian covers, the foam-looking caps on the players' helmets. The league is also allowing players to wear these during games. The goal here is to help reduce injuries on the field. Joining us today with more on the science of all this is 9 News health expert Dr. Payal Kohli. So they call these Guardian caps. What are these? How do these work for people who aren't familiar with them?
So these are basically foam helmet caps. So they're worn on top of a regular helmet. And the idea is they're made of these kind of lightweight material that's supposed to be protective. It's also supposed to allow for flexibility, right? Because the players have to be able to move their head. They can't have too much extra weight on their head because that could impair the way that they play. And again, the concept here is that they might shield them from the impact forces that could cause head trauma or injuries.
We talked so much about CTE in the last decade, and I mean, we can go on and on there, but is that really the goal here, is trying to prevent these injuries?
That's the problem here, Alex. It's really the head trauma has kind of come center stage. And the fact that we're causing head trauma, repetitive head injuries for recreational purposes. I mean, this is enjoyment. This is supposed to be fun. And these people could have possibly long-term effects on their morbidity and mortality, die earlier. So that's brought this center stage. And CTE is really the key here. And, you know, for those of us who don't know what CTE is, it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So chronic means it's a chronic condition that develops over time. Degenerative. So you're actually having repetitive trauma to your brain that's causing the neurons to degenerate. And I want to be clear here, it doesn't have to be trauma that makes you have a concussion or pass out. It's even subconcussive injuries, so the types that we would just, oh, they brushed it off and they're back to play. But that even causes the brain cells to degenerate over time. And we can't diagnose CTE when somebody's alive. There's no imaging test, there's no lab tests. And what we realized in a recent study that came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association is that up to 41% of young athletes under the age of 30 already have CTE, suggesting that we really have to do something.
That's pretty scary. So this is a padding on the outside. I know helmets have evolved from the inside padding.
Yeah.
Is there any science on how effective this is? I mean, it feels like it makes sense that you take padding on padding, it's going to be less of an impact.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Is there anything here?
The science here is actually kind of mixed, and that's what's interesting about this, because a lot of the professional organizations have advised against these Guardian caps, saying that they're not really making a significant impact. Now, if you look at the laboratory studies and you look at impact forces, they do reduce the force of impact. As you said, that makes sense because there's more padding, right? But are they reducing the force of impact enough to actually impact the development of CTE or concussions, which we know are also linked to brain degeneration, or are they just reducing impact for the sake of reducing impact? Because some of the scale with which they're reducing the impact is about 30%. Now, the NFL is actually trying these beefier helmets that have the thicker padding, and then they're doing these experiments where they have both players wear the padded helmets to see if it reduces impact potentially even more, because you can imagine two hard surfaces bumping on each other make more of an impact than two softer surfaces. So there's some Virginia Tech studies that have not yet been published, and this is the main criticism of this. How is the NFL already adopting this without published data? But some studies that suggest maybe a reduction in concussion of about 15 to 35% with these helmets.
It feels significant, but my question, or just curiosity, I should say, is like, are these players going to wear these things? They, you know, look a little goofy, and these are like young kids who are like, I don't want to be the first one out there, you know, to wear this. I'm hard. I mean, these are football players. So like, will they actually wear them, I think is another question we'll have to see.
You know, that's a really good point. And part of the culture of football, I think, is what we need to sort of redefine as we talk about some of this protective gear. Now, what the NFL has done is to strategically put the helmets on the players in the positions that are most likely to have impact. So you're talking about your offensive linemen, your defensive linemen, your tight ends, where they might have potentially more impact than others. That may be a way, I think, to start to get it in there. I know they're also trying to move it into the college space as well, so that it becomes part of how you think about playing football. Just like you wear your gear, you wear your regular helmet, you want to think about these padded helmets. But to me personally, I really want to see the data before we spend a ton of money and effort trying to get widespread adoption. I'm just really glad that we're having this conversation about head trauma, thinking about minimizing this, and it's not something we've brushed off like we have for so many years.
And how many parents of little football players are watching, thinking about their kiddo down the line, even high school and college ball, you know, how to protect their little heads. So.
Well, you know, it's funny, a lot of this came about with a parent of a young kid who passed away from repetitive head trauma. He was a teenager, and his dad started a lot of this petition and started to raise awareness of a lot of this. So I do think that these bottom-up efforts have really, really helped to bring this to fruition.
Dr. Kohli, thank you. Don't forget, you can find more with Dr. Kohli at 9news.com/Dr. Kohli.